Surgeon believed he was saving both twins, but one of them never existed. Welcome to today's story, a tale that will take you deep into the heart of medicine, human emotion, and the thin line between reality and desperate hope. If you enjoy stories that explore the depths of human experience, please consider giving this video a like. Your support helps us bring you more compelling narratives like this one. Today, we tell the story of Dr. James Sullivan, a brilliant pediatric surgeon whose life changed forever during what should have been a routine emergency. This is the story of how a man believed he was saving both twins, but one of them never existed. The rain hammered against the windows of St. Mary's Children's Hospital with relentless fury, each drop creating rivulets that distorted the city lights beyond. Dr. James Sullivan stood at his office window, watching the storm rage as he finished reviewing the day's surgical reports. At 42, he had dedicated nearly 2 decades of his life to pediatric surgery, and the weight of countless young lives saved and lost had carved deep lines around his tired eyes. The intercom crackled to life, shattering the quiet contemplation. "Dr. Sullivan to emergency stat, Dr. Sullivan to emergency stat." The voice carried an urgency that made his pulse quicken. After 20 years in medicine, he had learned to read between the lines of hospital communications, and this call spoke of desperation. He grabbed his white coat and rushed through the sterile corridors, his footsteps echoing against the polished floors. The emergency department buzzed with controlled chaos as he pushed through the double doors. Nurses moved with practiced efficiency, their faces tense with concentration. Dr. Sarah Chen, the head of emergency medicine, spotted him immediately and hurried over, her expression grave. "James, thank God you're here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We had twins via situation. Car accident, single mother with twin daughters, 8 years old. The mother didn't make it, but the twins..." She paused, taking a steadying breath. "They're in critical condition. One has severe internal bleeding, possible organ damage. The other has head trauma and multiple fractures." Dr. Sullivan felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with emergency surgery. "Where are they now?" "Operating rooms 3 and 4. We've got teams working on both, but we need you to take lead on the more critical case. Room 3, internal bleeding. Dr. Martinez is handling the head trauma case next door." As they walked briskly toward the operating rooms, Dr. Chen continued briefing him. "The girls are identical twins, Emma and Lily Patterson. 8 years old. No significant medical history. The accident happened about 40 minutes ago. Drunk driver ran a red light, hit them head on. The mother, Catherine Patterson, was pronounced dead at the scene. The words hit him like physical blows. 8 years old, twins, mother dead. These were the cases that haunted surgeons' dreams, the ones that reminded them of their own children, sleeping safely at home. Dr. Sullivan had twin daughters of his own, slightly older at 10, and he could picture their faces as clearly as if they were standing before him. "What about family? Anyone we can contact?" "Still working on it. The mother's purse was destroyed in the crash, but we found some emergency. Contact information. Social services is handling notifications." They reached the operating room, and Dr. Sullivan could see through the viewing window into room 3. A small figure lay on the table, surrounded by machines and monitors. The surgical team was already scrubbed in, waiting for his arrival. The sight of the child, so small and vulnerable under the harsh surgical lights, struck him with renewed determination. "I'm going in," he said, already moving toward the scrub station. "Keep me posted on the other twins' condition." As he scrubbed his hands methodically, his mind shifted into the focused state that had made him one of the hospital's most respected surgeons. Every motion became deliberate. Every thought centered on the task ahead. The warm water ran over his hands as he worked the antiseptic soap between his fingers, a ritual that had become as natural as breathing. The attending nurse helped him into his surgical gown and gloves, and he entered the operating room with the calm confidence that came from years of experience. The monitors beeped steadily, displaying vital signs that told the story of a young life hanging in the balance. The anesthesiologist looked up from his position at the head of the table. "She's stable for now, but we need to move fast. Blood, Pressure is dropping despite transfusions. Dr. Sullivan approached the table and looked down at Emma Patterson. Even unconscious and connected to life support, she bore the unmistakable features of childhood innocence. Her dark hair was matted with blood, but her face, peaceful in unconsciousness, reminded him powerfully of his own daughters. He had to push that thought away, compartmentalize it as he had learned to do over the years. "Talk to me about her injuries," he said to the trauma surgeon who had been working on her. "Blunt force trauma to the abdomen, possible liver laceration, internal bleeding is significant. We've got her on blood products, but she's going to need immediate surgical intervention. There might be damage to other organs as well. We won't know until we get in there." Dr. Sullivan nodded grimly. "Let's open her up and see what we're dealing with. Time is not on our side." As the first incision was made, he found himself thinking about the twin in the next room. Two little girls, alone in the world now, fighting for their lives in adjoining operating rooms. The symmetry was both poetic and heartbreaking. He wondered if they were close, if they shared that special bond that twins often had. His own daughters were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences, sharing dreams and secrets. The surgery proceeded with methodical precision. As they opened Emma's abdomen, the extent of her injuries became clear. The liver laceration was severe but repairable, and there was damage to the spleen that would require careful attention. Dr. Sullivan worked with the focused intensity that had earned him his reputation, his hands moving with practiced skill as he repaired torn tissue and stemmed bleeding. "How's the twin next door?" he asked the circulating nurse without looking up from his work. "Dr. Martinez says it's touch and go, significant brain swelling. They're trying to relieve the pressure." The words added urgency to his own work. If both girls were going to survive this night, every second counted. He could hear the faint sounds of activity from the adjoining operating room through the thin walls, the beeping of monitors and the quiet conversations of the surgical team. It was strange to think that two identical lives were being fought for simultaneously, separated only by a wall, but connected by genetics and tragedy. As he worked to repair Emma's spleen, Dr. Sullivan found himself making silent promises to the unconscious child. He would do everything in his power to save her, to give her a chance at the life that had been so cruelly interrupted. She deserved to grow up, to experience all the joys and sorrows that lay ahead. Her sister deserved the same chance. The monitors continued their steady rhythm, marking time as the surgery progressed. Each successful repair brought them closer to saving Emma's life, but Dr. Sullivan knew that the real test would come in the hours and days that followed. Surviving the surgery was just the first step in what would likely be a long and difficult recovery. 3 hours into Emma's surgery, Dr. Sullivan had successfully repaired the liver laceration and removed the damaged portion of her spleen. The internal bleeding had been controlled, and her vital signs were stabilizing. It was delicate work that required every ounce of his skill and experience, but he was cautiously optimistic about her chances. "Dr. Sullivan," the circulating nurse approached him quietly. "Dr. Martinez would like to speak with you when you have a moment." He looked up from his work, noting the expression on her face. "Is it urgent?" "He says it's important about the other twin." Dr. Sullivan felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. "Give me 5 minutes to close up here. Then I'll speak with him." As he worked to complete Emma's surgery, his mind raced with possibilities. Had Lily's condition deteriorated? Was there something he needed to know that might affect Emma's care? The twins were connected in ways beyond genetics now, their fates intertwined by this tragic night. He finished the final sutures and stepped back from the table. "She's stable. Get her to recovery and monitor her closely. Any changes, page me immediately." Dr. Sullivan stripped off his surgical gown and gloves, then stepped into the hallway between the two operating rooms. Dr. Martinez was waiting for him, still in his surgical attire, his face bearing an expression that Dr. Sullivan couldn't quite read. "How's Lily?" Dr. Sullivan asked immediately. Dr. Martinez paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "James, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." The girl you just operated on, are you certain she's one of twins? The question was so unexpected that Dr. Sullivan almost laughed. Of course she is. Dr. Chen briefed me when I arrived. Emma and Lily Patterson, 8-year-old identical twins. You're operating on Lily right now. Dr. Martinez shook his head slowly. That's what I thought too, but something doesn't add up. I've been going through the medical records and the accident report more carefully. James, there was only one child in that car. The words seemed to hang in the air between them, making no sense. Dr. Sullivan felt as if he were hearing a foreign language. That's impossible. I just spent 3 hours operating on Emma Patterson. You're working on her twin sister. I need you to come with me, Dr. Martinez said quietly. There's something you need to see. They walked to the viewing window of operating room 4, and Dr. Martinez gestured inside. Dr. Sullivan looked through the glass and saw exactly what he expected to see. A small figure on the operating table, surrounded by surgical equipment and monitors. The patient looked identical to Emma. The same dark hair, the same small frame. There's your patient, Dr. Sullivan said, confusion evident in his voice. Lily Patterson. Dr. Martinez pulled out a tablet and showed him the accident report. According to the police report and the paramedics' notes, there was one child in the car, 8-year-old Emma Patterson. No mention of a second child anywhere in the documentation. Dr. Sullivan stared at the report, his mind struggling to process the information. That has to be a mistake. Someone made an error in the paperwork. I spoke with Dr. Chen myself. She told me about both twins. I thought the same thing, so I called Dr. Chen. She's been in surgery herself for the past 4 hours, a different case entirely. She never spoke to you about twins tonight. The hallway seemed to tilt around Dr. Sullivan. He gripped the railing along the wall, his knees suddenly weak. That's impossible. Someone briefed me about the twins. Someone told me about Emma and Lily Patterson. James, I need you to think carefully. Who exactly spoke to you when you arrived at the emergency department? Dr. Sullivan closed his eyes, trying to recall the events of earlier that evening. The memory felt strangely fuzzy, like trying to remember a dream upon waking. He remembered rushing to the emergency department, remembered the urgency and chaos, but when he tried to focus on specific details, they seemed to slip away. It was Dr. Chen, he said, but even as he spoke the words, doubt crept into his voice. At least I thought it was Dr. Chen, someone in scrubs, someone who knew about the case. Dr. Martinez watched him with growing concern. James, when was the last time you slept? Really slept, not just a few hours between surgeries. The question caught him off guard. He tried to remember, but the days seemed to blur together. There had been so many emergencies lately, so many long nights at the hospital. His wife had been complaining about his absence, his daughters asking when Daddy would be home for dinner again. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe 3 days ago? There was that premature baby with the heart defect, then the car accident victim yesterday, and before that. James, you've been working almost non-stop for over a week. The other surgeons have been worried about you. You've been taking on cases that could have been handled by others, working double shifts. Dr. Sullivan felt a strange disconnection from reality, as if he were watching this conversation happen to someone else. But the twins. I operated on Emma. She's in recovery right now. There is an Emma Patterson in recovery. You did operate on her tonight and you saved her life, but there never was a second twin. There never was a Lily. The words hit him like a physical blow. He stumbled backward, his back against the wall. That's impossible. I saw her medical chart. I spoke to the staff about both girls. Dr. Martinez stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. James, I think you need to sit down. You've been under tremendous stress lately, working impossible hours. Sometimes the mind creates what it needs to cope with trauma. You're saying I imagined the second twin. Dr. Sullivan's voice was barely a whisper. I'm saying that you were faced with a situation that reminded you powerfully of your own daughters. An 8-year-old girl, alone in the world after losing her mother in a tragic accident. Your mind may have created a twin sister because the alternative, a child facing the world completely alone, was too painful to accept. Dr. Sullivan slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor of the hospital corridor. The revelation was overwhelming, challenging everything he thought he knew about the evening's events. If there was no second twin, then who had he been thinking about during Emma's surgery? Whose life had he been fighting for in the adjoining operating room? The sounds I heard from the other operating room during surgery, the activity. Room 4 has been empty all night except for cleaning staff. The sounds you heard were from room 5, where Dr. Peterson was working on a motorcycle accident victim. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, creating a picture that Dr. Sullivan didn't want to see. His exhausted mind had constructed an elaborate fiction to help him cope with the tragedy of Emma Patterson's situation. The twin sister had been a creation of his subconscious, a way to ensure that Emma wouldn't be completely alone in the world. "But I spoke to someone about the twins," he insisted weakly. "Someone gave me the briefing." Dr. Martinez knelt down beside him. "The night shift supervisor told me that when you arrived, you went straight to the charge desk and started reading Emma's chart. You seemed to be having a conversation with someone, but there was no one there. Then you announced that you were taking the case and headed to surgery." The memory felt like trying to grasp smoke. Dr. Sullivan could remember the conversation so clearly, could recall the details about both twins, their injuries, their mother's death. But now, with Dr. Martinez's revelation, those memories felt suspect, like scenes from a movie he had watched rather than events he had experienced. "Dr. Sullivan?" A nurse approached cautiously. "Emma Patterson is awake in recovery. She's asking for her sister." The irony was crushing. Even the child herself believed she had a twin sister, but Dr. Sullivan now realized that Emma's confusion was the result of head trauma and medication, not evidence that Lily existed. The girl's injured mind was creating its own version of reality, just as his exhausted psyche had done. Dr. Sullivan struggled to his feet, Dr. Martinez steadying him with a firm hand on his elbow. The hospital corridor suddenly felt foreign and unfamiliar, as if he were seeing it for the first time. The fluorescent light seemed too bright, the antiseptic smell too sharp, everything slightly out of focus like a photograph taken with unsteady hands. "I need to see her," he said quietly. "I need to see Emma." They walked together toward the recovery ward, Dr. Sullivan's footsteps uncertain, on the polished floor. His mind kept trying to reconcile what he believed had happened with the reality Dr. Martinez had presented. The memories of treating two patients felt so real, so vivid, that accepting their falseness seemed impossible. The recovery ward was dimly lit, designed to provide a calm environment for patients emerging from surgery. Emma Patterson lay in bed, number 3, small and fragile against the white sheets. She was awake but groggy, her eyes tracking slowly around the room as she tried to orient herself. When she saw Dr. Sullivan approach, she attempted a weak smile. "Doctor?" Her voice was barely audible, hoarse from the breathing tube that had been removed only an hour earlier. "Hello, Emma. I'm Dr. Sullivan. I performed your surgery tonight. How are you feeling?" "Tired," she whispered. "My tummy hurts." "That's normal. After surgery, the nurses will give you medicine to help with the pain." He pulled a chair close to her bed and sat down, studying her face. She looked exactly as he remembered from the operating table, but now he found himself searching for signs of the twin sister his mind had created. "Where's Lily?" Emma asked suddenly, her eyes showing the first signs of real alertness. "Is she okay? The car hit us really hard." Dr. Sullivan felt his heart break a little more. The child's confusion was understandable. Trauma and medication could cause all sorts of disorientation, but hearing her ask for the sister who didn't exist made the situation even more poignant. "Emma, can you tell me about your family? Who lives at home with you?" The girl's brow furrowed as she tried to concentrate. "Just me and Mommy. We live in the blue house on Maple Street. Mommy works at the bank." Her expression suddenly changed, confusion giving way to fear. "Where is Mommy? Is she hurt too?" Dr. Sullivan exchanged a glance with Dr. Martinez. The social worker would need to handle the conversation about Emma's mother, but first they needed to understand her mental state. "Emma, you mentioned Lily. Can you tell me who Lily is? She's my sister, Emma said without hesitation. My twin sister. We were in the car together when it happened. The man ran the red light and hit us. She tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. Where is she? Why isn't she here? The certainty in her voice was unsettling. Dr. Sullivan had expected confusion, perhaps mixing up memories or creating false recollections due to her head injury. But Emma spoke about Lily with the same clarity she used when talking about her mother and their home. Emma, I want you to think carefully. At home, how many bedrooms are there? 2, mine and Mommy's. And where does Lily sleep? Emma looked at him as if the question were absurd. In my room, of course. We have bunk beds. I sleep on the top, she sleeps on the bottom. She's scared of heights. Dr. Martinez stepped forward. Emma, I'm Dr. Martinez. I want to help you remember things correctly. Sometimes, after accidents, our memories can get mixed up. Can you tell me what you remember about tonight? The 8-year-old closed her eyes, her face scrunching with concentration. Mommy picked us up from school late because she had to work. We were going to get pizza for dinner. Lily was excited because it was her favorite, pepperoni with extra cheese. We were almost at the restaurant when the other car hit us. She opened, her eyes looking directly at Dr. Sullivan. Lily was sitting next to me in the back seat. She screamed when she saw the car coming. Where is she? Please tell me she's okay. Dr. Sullivan felt trapped between two impossible realities. The medical evidence was clear. There had been only one child in the car, only one patient brought to the hospital. But Emma's memories were so detailed, so consistent, that dismissing them as simple confusion seemed inadequate. Let me check on something, he said gently. I'll be right back. He stepped out of the recovery room with Dr. Martinez, his mind racing. This doesn't make sense. She has a head injury. If she's confused from medication, why are her memories so specific? And why are they consistent with what I thought I experienced? Dr. Martinez pulled out his phone. Let me call the police officer who worked the accident. Zine, maybe there's something we're missing. While Dr. Martinez made the call, Dr. Sullivan leaned against the wall and tried to think rationally. He had been exhausted, working long hours under tremendous stress. It was possible, even probable, that his mind had played tricks on him, but Emma's detailed memories of a twin sister couldn't be explained by his psychological state. Dr. Martinez finished his call and approached with a troubled expression. The responding officer is coming up to speak with us. He says there's something about the accident scene that didn't make it into the initial report. 20 minutes later, Officer Rodriguez arrived at the hospital still wearing his rain-soaked uniform. He was a veteran police officer with over 15 years of experience, and his face bore the weathered look of someone who had seen too much tragedy. Doctors, I understand you have questions about the Patterson accident. We need to know exactly how many people were in the car, Dr. Martinez said. Our patient keeps talking about a twin sister, but our records show only one child. Officer Rodriguez nodded grimly. That's what's been bothering me all night. When I first arrived at the scene before the paramedics got there, I could have sworn I saw 2 children in the back seat. But when the EMTs pulled the victims from the car, there was only one child. Dr. Sullivan felt a chill run down his spine. You saw 2 children? I thought I did. The car was pretty mangled, dark, raining hard. But I've been doing this long enough to trust my instincts, and my instincts told me there were 2 kids back there. He paused, running a hand through his graying hair. I figured I was mistaken when only one child was brought out, but it's been nagging at me. What about the mother's purse? Any family photos? Dr. Martinez asked. That's another strange thing. The purse was destroyed in the crash, but we found her wallet thrown clear. Driver's license, credit cards, some cash, but no photos, which is unusual for a mother with children. Dr. Sullivan's world was tilting again, but in a different direction this time. Officer, is it possible that a second child could have been thrown from the vehicle on impact? We did a thorough search of the area, brought in dogs and everything. No second child, no evidence of one. But he hesitated, looking uncomfortable. There was one odd thing. We found a small backpack about 30 feet from the crash site, pink with unicorns on it. But it was empty. No ID, no school papers, nothing that would help us figure out who it belonged to. The three men stood in silence, each contemplating the implications. Dr. Sullivan felt as if he were standing at the edge of a precipice, uncertain whether what lay below was solid ground or empty air. The next morning brought no clarity to the mystery surrounding Emma Patterson and her alleged twin sister. Dr. Sullivan had spent a sleepless night in the hospital's on-call room, his mind churning over the contradictory evidence. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see 2 operating rooms, hear the sounds of parallel surgeries, feel the weight of responsibility for 2 young lives. But in the harsh light of morning, only 1 child remained in the pediatric ward. Dr. Sullivan made his rounds early, checking on Emma before the day shift arrived. She was awake and more alert, her vital signs stable and encouraging. The surgery had been successful and her body was responding well to treatment. Physically, she was healing. Emotionally, however, she remained adamant about her missing sister. "Did you find Lily?" were her first words when she saw him approach her bed. "Emma, I need to ask you some more questions about Lily," he said gently, pulling up a chair. "Can you tell me about school? What grade are you in?" "3rd grade at Riverside Elementary. Mrs. Johnson is our teacher." "Our teacher?" "Mine and Lily's. We're in the same class." Emma's eyes grew wide with sudden realization. She must be worried. Lily wasn't in school yesterday because she had a tummy ache. "When I don't come to school today, Mrs. Johnson will wonder where we both are." Dr. Sullivan made a mental note to contact the school. If Emma truly had a twin sister, the school records would provide definitive proof. "What does Lily look like?" Emma smiled for the first time since the accident. "She looks just like me, silly. We're identical twins. People can only tell us apart because I have a freckle right here." She pointed to a spot just below her left ear. "And Lily doesn't." Dr. Sullivan examined the area Emma had indicated and found exactly what she described. A small, dark freckle just below her left earlobe. It was such a specific detail, the kind of thing that twins would use to help others distinguish between them. "Emma, can you tell me about your birthday? When is it?" "October 15th. Lily and I always have joint birthday parties because we were born on the same day. Last year we had a princess theme, and Lily dressed up as Belle because yellow is her favorite color." The details continued to be remarkably specific and consistent. Dr. Sullivan found himself documenting everything Emma said, looking for contradictions or signs of fabrication, but finding none. Her memories of Lily were as clear and detailed as her memories of her mother and their home life. After leaving Emma's room, Dr. Sullivan went directly to his office and began making phone calls. His first call was to Riverside Elementary School, where he spoke with the principal, Mrs. Davidson. "I'm calling about Emma Patterson, one of your 3rd grade students," he began. "She was in a car accident last night and is currently in our pediatric ward." "Oh my goodness, is she all right? And what about Lily?" Dr. Sullivan's breath caught. "Lily, her twin sister, they're both in Mrs. Johnson's class. Are they both injured?" The confirmation hit him like a thunderbolt. "Mrs. Davidson, can you tell me exactly how many Patterson children are enrolled in your school?" "2, of course. Emma and Lily Patterson, identical twins, 8 years old. Their mother, Catherine, is listed as the emergency contact." There was a pause. "Doctor, is something wrong? You sound confused. I need to see their school records, both children's records. Can you fax them to me immediately?" Within an hour, Dr. Sullivan was staring at documentation that confirmed Emma's story in every detail. 2 enrollment forms, both filled out in the same handwriting and signed by Catherine Patterson. 2 sets of emergency contact information. 2 class schedules, identical except for a note that Lily was in the school's gifted reading program while Emma was in the SAY. Standard curriculum, but most compelling were the class photos. The 3rd grade class picture showed 24 children arranged in 3 rows. In the back row, standing side by side, were two identical girls with dark hair and bright smiles. The name labels beneath identified them as Emma Patterson and Lily Patterson. Dr. Sullivan studied the photograph with a magnifying glass, looking for any signs of manipulation or digital alteration. But the image appeared authentic, and the two girls were clearly distinct individuals, not multiple exposures, of the same child. Emma stood slightly taller and had the freckle below her left ear that she had described. Lily was a fraction shorter and had no visible freckle. His hands shaking, Dr. Sullivan called Mrs. Johnson, Emma and Lily's teacher. Dr. Sullivan, I heard about the accident. How are the girls? Mrs. Johnson, I need you to think very carefully. Your class, do you have one Patterson child or two? The question was met with a long silence. Doctor, that's a strange question. Of course I have two. Emma and Lily have been in my class since September. They're delightful girls, very close to each other but with distinct personalities. Can you describe them for me? Well, Emma is the more outgoing of the two, always raising her hand to answer questions. She's very good at math and loves science. Experiments. Lily is quieter, more thoughtful. She's an exceptional reader, far above grade level. She often finishes her work early and helps other students with theirs. The descriptions matched perfectly with what Emma had told him about herself. And her sister. Dr. Sullivan felt as if he were losing his grip on reality. The evidence for Lily's existence was overwhelming, yet she was nowhere to be found. Mrs. Johnson, was Lily in school yesterday? No, she called in sick. Just Lily, not Emma. That was unusual because when one twin gets sick, usually both of them do eventually. Emma seemed lonely without her sister there. Dr. Sullivan hung up the phone and sat in stunned silence. The school records, the teacher's testimony, Emma's detailed memories, all pointed to the existence of a twin sister who had somehow vanished without a trace. But the medical evidence, the police report, the physical reality of the situation, all indicated that only one child had been in that car. He picked up the phone again and called his wife, Susan. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright with the bustling energy of getting their own twin daughters ready for school. James, you sound terrible. Did you get any sleep at all last night? Susan, I need to ask you something and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Okay, she said, her tone becoming more serious. What's wrong? How many daughters do we have? The question was met with silence, then a small laugh. James, what kind of question is that? Are you feeling all right? Please, just answer me. How many daughters do we have? 2, of course. Sarah and Jessica. James, you're scaring me. What's going on? Relief flooded through him. His own reality remained intact. His twin daughters existed, were real, were getting ready for school at that very moment. The problem wasn't with his perception of twins. General, but something specific to the Patterson case. I'm sorry, Susan. I'm working on a difficult case and I needed to verify something. Give the girls my love. But even as he hung up, Dr. Sullivan realized that his relief was premature. If his perception of his own family was accurate, why had he apparently hallucinated an entire surgical procedure on a non-existent patient? And why did everyone else seem to remember Lily Patterson as clearly as he did? There was one more call he needed to make. He dialed the number for Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a colleague who specialized in forensic psychiatry. If anyone could help him understand what was happening, it would be her. Elizabeth, I need your help with something unusual. I have a case that's challenging everything I think I know about reality. That sounds intriguing, James. Tell me about it. Dr. Sullivan recounted the entire story, from his exhausted state when he arrived at the hospital to the conflicting evidence about Lily Patterson's existence. Dr. Harper listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification about specific details. When he finished, there was a long pause before she spoke. James, what you're describing sounds like a case of shared psychotic disorder, sometimes called folie à deux. It's extremely rare, but it can occur when multiple people share the same delusional belief. But the school records, the photographs, that's what makes this so unusual. Typically, Shared psychotic disorder involves subjective beliefs that can't be verified objectively. What you're describing has physical evidence that supports the delusion, which shouldn't be possible. Dr. Harper arrived at the hospital that afternoon, her presence bringing a sense of professional objectivity that Dr. Sullivan desperately needed. She was a woman in her 50s with graying hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to see through surface appearances to the deeper truths beneath. Her reputation for solving complex psychological mysteries had made her one of the most respected forensic psychiatrists in the region. "I want to start by interviewing Emma," she said as they walked toward the pediatric ward. Children are often more reliable witnesses than adults because they haven't learned to filter their memories through social expectations. Emma was sitting up in bed, looking much stronger than she had the day before. Her color had improved, and she was picking at a lunch tray that had been brought to her room. When Dr. Harper introduced herself, Emma responded with the polite but wary manner that children often display around new adults. "Emma, I'm here to help figure out what happened to your sister Lily," Dr. Harper said gently. "Can you tell me about the last time you saw her?" Emma's face lit up at the mention of her sister. "She was right next to me in the car. We were both wearing our seatbelts like Mommy always made us do. When the other car hit us, everything went really fast and loud. I remember Lily reaching for my hand and then I woke up here." What was Lily wearing that night? Her favorite purple sweater, the one with the butterfly on it, and her new jeans that Mommy bought her last week. She was so excited about those jeans because they had sparkly threads in them. Dr. Harper took detailed notes as Emma spoke, her trained eye watching for any signs of deception or confusion. But Emma's account remained consistent and detailed, told with the genuine emotion of a child who had experienced trauma. "Emma, I need to ask you something that might seem strange," Dr. Harper said carefully. "Has anyone ever told you that you don't have a sister?" Emma's expression shifted to one of complete bewilderment. "That's silly. Of course I have a sister. Why would someone say that? I'm just trying to understand what happened. Sometimes after accidents, people can get confused about things." "I'm not confused," Emma said firmly. "Lily is my twin sister. We've been together since before we were born. Mommy used to tell us stories about how we would kick each other in her tummy and how we were born holding hands." After the interview, Dr. Harper and Dr. Sullivan retreated to a quiet conference room to discuss her findings. Dr. Harper spread out her notes on the table, organizing them into categories that only she seemed to understand. "James, I've interviewed hundreds of children who have experienced trauma, and I can tell you with certainty that Emma is not lying or confused. She genuinely believes she has a twin sister, and her memories of that sister are remarkably detailed and consistent. So what does that mean? It means we need to expand our investigation beyond the medical and psychological explanations. There's something else going on here, something that doesn't fit into conventional categories." Dr. Harper pulled out her phone and made a call to a colleague at the city's Department of Vital Records. After a brief conversation, she hung up with a troubled expression. "James, I need you to prepare yourself for something that's going to challenge everything you think you know about this case." "What did you find?" "There are birth certificates on file for both Emma and Lily Patterson. Both were born on October 15th, 8 years ago, at this very hospital. Both were delivered by Dr. Michael Chen, Sarah Chen's husband, who was the head of obstetrics at the time." Dr. Sullivan felt the world spinning around him. "That's impossible. If both children were born here, there should be medical records, documentation, a paper trail." "That's exactly what I thought. So I called Dr. Michael Chen directly." Dr. Harper paused, her expression grave. "James, he remembers the birth clearly. He told me it was one of the most difficult deliveries of his career. Identical twins, but there were complications." "What kind of complications?" "Lily was born with a severe heart defect. She lived for only 3 hours after birth. Dr. Chen said it was one of the most heartbreaking cases he'd ever handled, watching parents lose one child while celebrating the birth of another." The revelation hit Dr. Sullivan like a physical blow. He slumped in his chair, his mind struggling to process the information. So, Lily did exist, but she died as a newborn. According to Dr. Chen, yes. But here's where it gets strange. When I asked him about the death certificate, he said he never filed one. He told me that Catherine Patterson, the mother, couldn't accept that Lily had died. She insisted on taking both babies home from the hospital. Dr. Harper continued, her voice gentle but relentless. The hospital staff was so moved by the family's tragedy that they made an exception to protocol. They allowed Catherine to take Lily's body home, supposedly for a private burial. But Dr. Chen always wondered what really happened because no death certificate was ever filed and no burial permit was ever issued. Dr. Sullivan felt pieces of the puzzle falling into place, creating a picture that was both heartbreaking and disturbing. Are you saying that Catherine Patterson pretended her dead daughter was alive for 8 years? It appears that way. And, more than that, she created an entire fictional life for Lily. School enrollment, class photos, birthday parties, everything. The whole community was complicit in maintaining the illusion, probably out of compassion for a grieving mother. The implications were staggering. Dr. Sullivan thought about Emma, growing up believing she had a twin sister who had actually died at birth. He thought about the school officials, the teachers, the neighbors who had all participated in an elaborate fiction designed to protect a mother's fragile psyche. But the class photographs, the school records, digital manipulation has become remarkably sophisticated. It would be relatively easy to create documentation that appeared authentic, and people tend to see what they expect to see. If everyone believed there were 2 Patterson children, then that's what they would remember seeing. Dr. Harper pulled out another document. I also spoke with a neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who lived next door to the Pattersons. She told me something interesting. She said Catherine would often have conversations with Lily, but Mrs. Rodriguez never actually saw the second child. She assumed Lily was shy and stayed in her room when visitors came over. What about Emma? She has specific memories of interacting with her sister. Children are remarkably adaptable. If everyone around Emma reinforced the idea that she had a twin sister, if her mother spoke to Lily and bought clothes for her and set a place for her at dinner, then Emma would have internalized that reality. Her memories of Lily would be a combination of imagination, wishful thinking, and the false memories that were constantly being reinforced by the adults around her. Dr. Sullivan stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city beyond. The explanation made sense, but it raised disturbing questions about the nature of reality and the lengths to which people would go to protect each other from painful truths. What about my experience in the operating room? I was convinced I was operating on Emma while another team worked on Lily. Extreme exhaustion can cause hallucinations and false memories. Your mind was already primed to expect 2 patients because of Emma's condition and her references to her sister. When you learned about the case, your subconscious created the twin surgery scenario as a way to make sense of the information you were receiving. Dr. Harper approached him at the window. James, what you experienced wasn't madness or incompetence. It was a very human response to an extraordinary situation. Sometimes our minds create the reality we need in order to cope with circumstances that are too painful to accept. But now I have to tell Emma the truth. I have to destroy her entire understanding of her family and her identity. Actually, that's not necessarily true. Emma has just lost her mother and survived a traumatic accident. Adding the shock of learning that her sister never existed could be devastating to her psychological recovery. Dr. Sullivan turned from the window. So, what do? We help her heal, physically and emotionally. We provide her with the support and care she needs to build a new life. And we let her hold on to the memories of Lily for as long as she needs them. Sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do is allow people to keep their protective illusions until they're strong enough to face reality. 3 months after the accident, Dr. Sullivan sat in his office reviewing Emma Patterson's case file one final time before her discharge meeting. The physical healing had been remarkable. The surgical repairs had held perfectly, and Emma had regained full function of all her organs. She was a resilient 8-year-old who had bounced back from her injuries with the amazing recuperative powers that children possess. The emotional healing had been more complex. Emma had been placed in the care of her maternal grandmother, Margaret Patterson, a gentle woman in her 60s who had moved from across the country to provide a stable home for her granddaughter. Margaret had been briefed on the situation regarding Lily, and with Dr. Harper's guidance, she had learned to navigate the delicate balance between honoring Emma's memories and gradually helping her adapt to her new reality. Dr. Sullivan had continued to visit Emma regularly during her recovery, partly out of professional obligation, but mostly because he had developed a genuine affection for the brave little girl. Their conversations had evolved over the months, and he had watched as Emma slowly began to process her loss and trauma. "Dr. Sullivan?" Emma's voice was bright as she entered his office for their final meeting. She was wearing a new dress that her grandmother had bought her, and her hair had been styled in a way that made her look older than her 8 years. "Hello, Emma. You look wonderful today. How are you feeling?" "Much better," Grandma Margaret says. "I'm getting stronger every day." She settled into the chair across from his desk, her legs swinging slightly as they dangled above the floor. "Emma, I wanted to talk to you about something important. You know that you're going to be starting at a new school next week." "Yes, Grandma found a good school near her house. I'm excited, but also a little nervous." Dr. Sullivan chose his words carefully. "Emma, when you start at the new school, you might find that some things are different from what you remember at your old school." Emma nodded thoughtfully. Dr. Harper explained that sometimes after accidents our memories can get mixed up. She said it's normal, and that it doesn't mean I'm crazy or anything. That's exactly right. And I want you to know that whatever you remember about your family, about your life before the accident, those memories are important and real to you. They're part of who you are. "I know that Lily isn't coming to the new school with me," Emma said quietly. "I'm not sure why, but I know she's not." It was a significant breakthrough. Over the months, Emma had gradually stopped asking about Lily's whereabouts, though she still spoke about her in present tense. Dr. Harper had explained that this was Emma's way of slowly letting go of the fiction while still honoring the emotional reality of what Lily had meant to her. "How do you feel about that?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "Sad, but also okay. I think maybe Lily is somewhere else now, somewhere safe. Maybe she's with Mommy." The wisdom in her simple words was profound. Emma had found her own way to make sense of her loss, creating a narrative that allowed her to let go, while still maintaining the love and connection she felt for her sister. "I think that's a beautiful way to think about it," Dr. Sullivan said softly. "Dr. Sullivan, can I ask you something?" "Of course. That night when you operated on me, did you think about Lily too?" The question caught him off guard. In all their conversations, Emma had never directly asked about his experience that night. "Yes, I did think about her. I wanted to make sure you were both going to be okay. I think you helped her too, in your own way. Even if she wasn't there in the hospital, you were thinking about her, caring about her. That means something." Dr. Sullivan felt tears prick at his eyes. This 8-year-old child had somehow found a way to give meaning to his confusing and painful experience. She had transformed his hallucination into an act of compassion, his psychological breakdown into a form of healing. "Emma, you are one of the wisest people I've ever met." She smiled, and for a moment, Dr. Sullivan could see the ghost of another smile beside hers, the shadow of a sister who had existed in love if not in life. The meeting concluded with hugs and promises to stay in touch. Margaret Patterson expressed her gratitude to Dr. Sullivan and the entire medical team for their care and compassion. As they left the hospital, Emma turned back once to wave goodbye, and Dr. Sullivan knew that he would carry this case with him for the rest of his career. Later that evening, Dr. Sullivan sat in his own living room, watching his twin daughters, Sarah and Jessica, work on their homework at the kitchen table. They were chattering about their day at school, finishing each other's sentences in the way that twins often do. The normalcy of the scene was both comforting and poignant after the months of dealing with Emma's case. His wife Susan joined him on the couch, noting his contemplative mood. "You've been quiet tonight? How did Emma's final appointment go?" "She's going to be fine," he said, pulling his wife closer. "She's an amazing little girl. She's found a way to make peace with her loss that's both heartbreaking and inspiring." "And how are you doing with it? I know this case has been difficult for you." Dr. Sullivan considered the question. The experience had changed him in ways he was still discovering. It had forced him to confront the limits of his own perception and the power of the human mind to create reality. But more than that, it had taught him about the complexity of healing and the different forms that love could take. "I think I'm learning that there are different kinds of truth," he said slowly. "There's medical truth, based on evidence and facts, but there's also emotional truth, based on love and need and the human capacity to create meaning from tragedy. Which truth is more important? I used to think it was the medical truth, always. But now I think maybe the most important truth is the one that helps people heal and move forward with their lives." Susan nodded, understanding in her gentle way that her husband had been through something profound. "Emma was lucky to have you. As her doctor, I think maybe I was the lucky one. She taught me something about the nature of healing that I couldn't have learned from any textbook." As the weeks passed, Dr. Sullivan received updates on Emma's progress. She had adjusted well to her new school and had made friends quickly. Her grandmother reported that she rarely mentioned Lily anymore, but when she did, it was with a sense of peace rather than confusion or grief. The case had become something of a legend at the hospital, discussed in hushed tones in the break rooms and corridors. Dr. Harper had written a paper about it for a psychiatric journal, focusing on the collaborative nature of the illusion and the role of community in maintaining protective fantasies. But for Dr. Sullivan, the most important lesson had been personal. He had learned that healing wasn't just about repairing physical damage or correcting psychological disorders. Sometimes healing meant allowing people to keep the parts of their reality that gave them strength, even if those parts couldn't be verified by medical science. 6 months after the accident, Dr. Sullivan received a hand-drawn card in the mail. It was from Emma, now settled in her new life with her grandmother. The card showed a picture of a little girl standing in a garden, and beside her, drawn in slightly fainter lines, was the figure of another little girl. Inside the card, Emma had written in her careful 8-year-old handwriting, "Dear Dr. Sullivan, thank you for taking care of me and Lily. I know she's okay now because you made sure we both got better. Love, Emma." Dr. Sullivan kept the card on his desk, a reminder of the night when he believed he was saving both twins, and the discovery that in some ways perhaps he had. He had learned that there are many ways to exist, many forms of reality, and many definitions of healing. The case had taught him that the most important question wasn't whether Lily Patterson had ever truly existed, but whether the love and care that surrounded her memory had been real. And in that regard, there was no question at all. Emma Patterson had lost her mother and her sister in a tragic accident, but she had gained something else, a community of people who cared enough to protect her from unbearable truth until she was strong enough to create her own version of reality. And in that version, love persisted beyond death, connection transcended physical existence, and healing came not from forgetting, but from learning to carry loss with grace. Dr. Sullivan had thought he was saving Emma's life that night in the operating room. But in the end, it was Emma who had saved him, teaching him that the heart's truth is sometimes more powerful than the mind's logic, and that the most profound healing often comes not from cutting away damaged tissue, but from learning to live with the beautiful scars that love leaves behind. The story of the surgeon who believed he was saving both twins, when one of them never existed, had become a testament to the power of human compassion and the many forms that love can take. And, in the end, that was the most important truth of all. Years later, Dr. Sullivan would often reflect on that night and the months that followed. The case had fundamentally changed his approach to medicine. teaching him that healing involved more than just surgical skill and medical knowledge. It required understanding the complex interplay between mind, body, and spirit. He began incorporating this understanding into his practice, taking more time to listen to his patients and their families, recognizing that their emotional truths were as important as their medical conditions. He developed a reputation not just as a skilled surgeon, but as a doctor who understood the human heart. The hospital established a new protocol for dealing with cases involving psychological trauma and complex family dynamics, partly inspired by Emma's situation. Dr. Harper became a regular consultant on cases where the line between physical and emotional healing was blurred. Emma Patterson grew up to become a nurse, inspired by the compassion she had received during her darkest hours. She specialized in pediatric care, drawn to helping children who face their own struggles with loss and recovery. She carried with her always the lessons learned from that terrible night and the healing that followed. On quiet evenings, she would sometimes speak to Lily, not as a confused child clinging to delusion, but as a young woman honoring the memory of a sister whose existence had been brief but whose impact had been profound. In those moments, the boundary between reality and love became beautifully, peacefully blurred. Dr. Sullivan kept Emma's card on his desk throughout his career, a daily reminder that the most important healing often happens not in operating rooms, but in the spaces between truth and hope, between what is and what we need to believe. And in those spaces, miracles of the heart occur every day, invisible to medical instruments but as real as any beating heart. The night he thought he was saving both twins had taught him that sometimes the most profound act of healing is to hold space for love in all its forms, even when that love exists only in memory, hope, and the infinite capacity of the human heart to create meaning from loss.